In the grim dark of the far future, there is only war. Throughout history we have seen untold horrors and misery inflicted on humanity by the forces of chaos and their associated ruinous powers, with trillions upon trillions of lives across countless worlds being decimated, enslaved or corrupted by the evil forces of chaos. Humanity fights a constant pitched battle against the dark tide of corruption that seeks to sweep across the galaxy, especially in the current setting with the opening of the Great Rift. And there are those who would stand against the corruption of the warp, including Vulkan, the Lord of Drakes. Greetings all, I'm your guide, the Archivist. Today I will dive into an overview of Vulkan, his rise to power, and his final fate. Before we begin, please make sure to like and subscribe waypoints down below, so that more people can learn from the archives. Who was Vulkan? Vulkan stood as one of the 20 superhuman Primarchs, a perpetual crafted by the Emperor of Mankind using modified versions of his own DNA, tasked with leading the Great Crusade to unite humanity within the Imperium of Man. The 18th Legion, born from Vulkan's genetic material and initially called the Dragon Warriors, was later renamed the Salamanders, paying homage to the fire-resistant creatures on his volcanic homeworld of Nocturne. This change was made to commemorate a significant event in 1832 M30, when the Emperor and Vulkan battled, leading to the revelation of the Emperor's true identity and the Primarch's restoration to the Imperium. Similar to his genetic father, Vulkan was a perpetual, a rare human mutant blessed with the exceptional regenerative abilities, allowing him to cheat death repeatedly, regardless of the severity of his injuries. This extraordinary power remained unknown to him until the Horus Heresy and his near-fatal encounter during the drop site massacre on Isfahan 5. Throughout the Great Crusade, Vulkan distinguished himself among his peers, displaying an unusual level of empathy toward ordinary humans, and demonstrating exceptional skill in crafting unique and powerful advanced technology. Roughly a millennium after the Horus Heresy, Vulkan concealed 9 sacred artifacts across the galaxy for the Salamanders to discover, viewing it as a test of their worthiness to follow him. Subsequently he vanished, leaving his genetic sons with the message that his return to lead the Salamanders in their greatest hour of need would occur upon the discovery of all the 9 items, as prophesied in the Tome of Fire, the sacred text of the Promethean cult. Origins. When the Primarchs were first brought into existence within the gene laboratories concealed between the Himalayan mountains on Terra, the machinations of the Chaos Gods caused the gestation capsules of the emerging Primarchs to scatter across the galaxy. The Promethean Opus, a significant source of Imperial knowledge of Vulkan, recounts the story of how one of the Emperor's superhuman offspring landed on the feudal death world of Nocturne during a tumultuous period known as the Time of Trial. The infant Vulkan descended like a blazing comet amongst the hardy and unyielding people of Nocturne, and was taken in as a foster child by a metal worker named Unbel, also known as a Black Smiter, in the city settlement of Hesiod. Recognizing the child as the prophesied saviour according to the teachings of the Promethean cult, Unbel named him Vulkan. Like all the Primarchs, Vulkan grew at an extraordinary rate, reaching full adulthood and surpassing the size and muscularity of any man on Nocturne by the age of only 3 Terran years. He also displayed exceptional intelligence, significantly enhancing the already remarkable metalworking skills of Nocturne's renowned smiths. Rapidly, Vulkan ascended in strength and wisdom, embracing the culture that had taken him in, labouring in his adopted father's forge, and hunting the formidable saurians and other creatures incited by the planet's fiery nature. He became a legendary champion in defending his world against even more perilous adversaries, known in Nocturne as Dusk Wraiths. In reality, these creatures were the most debased and despicable caste of Eldari slavers, Drukhari, nightmarish beings for whom pain and slaughter were an essential as sustenance, preying periodically on the rugged people of Nocturne for their wicked amusement. The Opus recounts that during Vulkan's 4th year, his town was besieged by the Dusk Wraiths on a slave-taking expedition. Whilst the townspeople usually hid when their decadent Xenos raided, Vulkan refused to cower. Armed only with a pair of blacksmith's hammers, he rallied the people and repelled the assault, single-handedly slaying 100 Drukhari warriors. As news of the battle spread, the leaders of the 7 most significant settlements on the planet came to honour Vulkan, pledging to confront their foes rather than hide from them. Faced with this threat, Vulkan underwent a transformation, and his legend reverberated across the world. He became known as the Fireborn, an invincible warrior whose superhuman strength had brought the slave barges crashing down from the sky, vanquishing Xenos in multitudes, and whose adamantine flesh had scorned their poison blades, expelling the dust rays from Nocturne. In honour of the Primarch's triumph over the Dark Eldar in the year 1832 M30 by the Imperial calendar, a tournament encompassing a range of challenges showcasing strength and craftsmanship intrinsic to the inhabitants of Nocturne unfolded. At the commencement of the festivities, an unfamiliar figure made an appearance. Distinctively fair-skinned amongst the typically dusky complexion of the Nocturne populace, clad in attire crafted from materials unknown to the pre-industrial Nocturnians, the stranger stood out. Expressing a desire to partake in the competition, the stranger asserted his ability to outshine any local participant, prompting laughter at the implied comparison to the superhuman Vulkan. Embracing the audacious challenge, Vulkan and the stranger agreed that the loser would pledge eternal loyalty and obedience to the victor. With a smile, Vulkan accepted the terms proposed by the Outlander. In the end, it all came down to the final trial, salamander slaying. Both men had a day and a half to forge a weapon and then go out and slay the largest salamander they could find. Vulkan and the stranger worked tirelessly at their forges, not pausing to rest. As the day drew to a close, they emerged. Vulkan had crafted a huge warhammer, whilst the stranger had made a keen-edged sword. They both climbed to the summit of Mount Deathfire, a massive volcano said to be the home of the largest fire drakes, the most fearsome species of salamander on the planet. Vulkan found his prey first, smashing its head off with a single blow from its hammer. As he carried the carcass back, the volcano unexpectedly erupted. Vulkan was nearly thrown off a cliff, but managed to grab onto the edge with one hand, stubbornly grasping the tail of his prize with the other. Vulkan held on for several hours, but his hold finally began to slip. It was at that time that the stranger reappeared, carrying a salamander larger than his own. The stranger quickly threw his carcass into the lava flow, using its heat-resistant hide as a bridge to cross over and save Vulkan. Vulkan was declared the winner when they returned home, since he had a salamander hide and the stranger had lost his, but Vulkan silenced the crowd. He knelt before the stranger, stating that any man who valued life over pride was worthy of his service. At this moment, the stranger revealed himself to be the Emperor of Mankind. Vulkan would take his rightful place as Primarch of the 18th Legion and ruler of his adopted world. Vulkan's only reservation on departing Nocturne was that he would not leave his people undefended, but the Emperor reassured him that his duty was not simply to one world but to many, worlds that knew the terror of darkness and the feasting of alien horrors uncounted as Nocturne had, and that Nocturne itself as the homeworld of a Primarch would forever be secured by his sons, the 18th Legion which bore his blood. When Vulkan arrived to aid his legion, it was during a critical time. The 18th, under the command of Lord Commander Cassian Vaughn, found himself defending a group of colony worlds near the Taras division against a relentless Orc invasion. With most of the Legionaries Astartes focused on vital missions, the 18th Legion was the only available one to respond to the dire situation. Despite facing overwhelming odds, the Legion, consisting of around 19,000 Space Marines, fought valiantly alongside local defenders for almost a standard year. Their efforts enabled the evacuation of 3 entire planetary populations to the relative safety of the Taras system, but at a great cost. The conflict resulted in the severe injury of their commander and left the rest of the 18th almost trapped on the perilous dead world of Antaeum, drawing the Orcs to them for battle. Even though assistance from other legions would have been challenging due to the distance from the main front of the Great Crusade, the 18th did not seek aid, resolved to either triumph on their own or perish in the attempt, understanding that weakening the Orc Marauder fleet would save countless human lives. However, upon learning of their predicament, their Primarch refused to stand idly by and swiftly organised his plans to come to their aid. After bringing his forces together, Vulkan led the 18th Legion back to Nocturne, where he oversaw the construction of a formidable stronghold on the moon of Prometheus. This stronghold would serve the Legion's headquarters and armory, whilst Nocturne itself would become the primary source of new recruits. Vulkan drew on his experiences alongside the Emperor and within the Imperial war machine, as well as the warrior and mystical traditions of Nocturne, to unite the Legion under a common purpose and belief. He demonstrated wisdom by honing the Terran veterans and incorporating the 18th Legion's past heraldry into the Reformed Legion. Vulkan also established the Pyre Guard as the Legion's foremost warriors, and crafted a unique dreadnought sarcophagus, the Iron Dragon, for the fallen First Master of the 18th, Cassian Vaughn. With these changes, the remade 18th Legion took on the name of the Salamanders of Nocturne, inspired by the formidable saurian predators native to the planet. His appearance. Vulkan is portrayed as a huge figure with a bald head and black skin, extremely large and powerful in form. He featured an extremely intricate and ornate armour and crafted many unique items and weapons he also possessed. Vulkan possesses a remarkable trait that distinguishes him from other Primarchs, his enduring patience and compassion. While it may be a product of his genetic makeup, it is also undoubtedly influenced by his upbringing in a humble village. This quality is evident on numerous occasions during the events on 1544. Despite the counsel of Ferrus Manus and even his own warriors, Vulkan consistently issues orders in the midst of combat aiming at minimizing harm to the local inhabitants. Among his brethren, it is widely acknowledged that Vulkan best embodies their father's vision of a harmonious Imperium. Physically, Vulkan surpasses all the other Primarchs in size and strength. Clad in his power armour, he stands as tall as Horus and in significantly larger Terminator armour, and possesses the ability to overturn Space Marine battle tanks with his bare hands. Even in sparring sessions with his fellow Primarchs, Vulkan consciously restrains himself, fearing that he may inadvertently inflict harm upon them. The physical bulk of Vulkan could not be understated, and he made some relatively smaller Primarchs look almost feeble in comparison. Powers and gear. During the Great Crusade, Vulkan gained a reputation among its participants for his unusual empathy for a Primarch towards average humans, as well as his extraordinary ability to craft unique and powerful items of advanced technology. Approximately 1,000 standard years after the Horus Heresy, Vulkan hid 9 sacred artifacts he had created around the galaxy for the Salamanders to find, intended as a test to see if they were worthy of his leadership. The Draken scale artificer armor stood as a marvel of the Imperium, and as a renowned relic in its own right. Its most striking feature was the skull of the great fire drake Kassar, mounted upon the Primarch's shoulder, forming the basis of the Legion's symbol. He also wielded a warhammer of immense size, crafted from reputedly indestructible material, Dawnbringer. It was so weighty that only a Primarch could wield it. In the hands of Vulkan, it could sunder any defense, from isolithic stone to the densest armor plate, and mercilessly crush countless foes. Additionally, Dawnbringer possessed enigmatic teleporter technology, enabling the Primarch to safely teleport vast distances across space, even spanning from one world to another. The Furnace's heart was an energy weapon fashioned in a Baroque style. This weapon greatly resembled a plasma pistol and was gifted to Vulkan by Ferrus Manus. It utilized charged shells to unleash potent laser-like blasts, capable of cutting through heavily armored adversaries. Yet the weapon wasn't truly favoured by Vulkan, leading to dark rumours about his reasons. Nevertheless, the Salamander's Primarch carried the weapon into battle at Isfahan 5 to honour his brother for the gift. Aside from his very impressive war gear, Vulkan was also known to be a perpetual, meaning that he would regenerate from virtually any wound or injury. This features heavily in his narrative later on and is one of the defining parts of his character. Like his genetic father, Vulkan was also a perpetual, a rare human mutant blessed with the extraordinary, almost supernatural cellular regeneration that allowed him to be resurrected from death over and over, no matter how much damage his body suffered. Vulkan was able to regenerate fully from any injury, including a death that resulted in the complete molecular disintegration. This ability was unknown to him until the Horus Heresy and his near death from an orbital atomic strike unleashed by the Iron Warriors fleet at the drop site massacre on Isfahan 5. His deeds. During the Great Crusade, the Salamanders were part of the 154th Expeditionary Fleet, aided by Imperial Army regiments from the death world of Faria. Their mission involved bringing numerous human-settled worlds into Imperial compliance. One remarkable campaign during this period was the Imperial Compliance Action on the world of Caldera, designated 1544 and known as Ibsen by its inhabitants. Under the leadership of Vulkan, The 18th Legion, alongside the Iron Hands and the Death Guard legions, undertook the task of bringing this newly discovered world into compliance. Caldera was underdeveloped and largely inhospitable to human life, but possessed valuable mineral deposits. However, the Imperial forces encountered strong resistance from the Eldar, who had established a garrison on Ibsen. The Eldar forces, including seers, warlocks, and other combat psykers, faced off against the Astartes legions but were ultimately defeated. Following their conquest, the Salamanders discovered that the Eldar had been defending a network of menhirs serving as psychic nodes, leading to a giant arch where the final confrontation took place. They also learned that the arch was actually a webway portal, unbeknownst to them at the time. Vulkan's unsettling encounter with the Rysteriant's Remembrancer before the battle eventually led him to uncover a primitive human tribal ceremony aimed at sacrificing an ancient dark Eldar witch beneath the arch. The discovery of the webway portal shed light on the Eldar's motives, as the portal had been used by Vulkan's youth. As the portal had been used in Vulkan's youth by the Dark Eldar to raid and pillage his home planet Nocturne. This revelation provided critical insight into the enigmatic Eldar and their activities. After overthrowing their dark counterparts, the Eldar gained control of the portal, freeing the inhabitants of Ibsen from the terrors of Dark Eldar incursions. Regarded as liberators, the Eldar were later defeated by the Imperium, causing panic among the natives. The Emperor, in disguise as the Remembrancer, displayed a keen interest in the mission, leading to significant resource allocation. Subsequently, Vulkan ordered the cleansing of Ibsen and its corrupted population by fire, renaming the Scorched World Caldera. Following this, Vulkan and the Salamander's Legion partook in a joint campaign of the Korarten alongside other Imperial forces. During this operation, Vulkan clashed with his brother Primarch Comrade Kurz over the brutal tactics of the Night Lord's Legion. This incident led to strained relations between the two Primarchs, influencing subsequent events in the Great Crusade and impacting Vulkan's fate after the tragedy of Isstvan V. The Heresy. The involvement of the Salamanders in the Horus Heresy remains enigmatic to scholars of the Imperium. What is known is that the 18th Legion, alongside the Iron Hands and the Raven Guard, took part in the initial assault against the traitors during the Dropside massacre of Isstvan V. Following Warmaster Horus's betrayal and the decimation of loyalist forces at the Battle of Isstvan III, the Emperor commanded 7 legions to confront the forces of chaos. Unbeknownst to the Imperium, 4 of these legions had already turned against their oath. Moments after the first dropship broke through the cloud layer, a barrage of gunfire erupted from emplaced batteries along the Urgal Depression. Despite the relentless flak, over 40,000 Salamanders made planetfall to join the fray. The impact claimed the majority of their ships and drop pods, leaving them with nearly full Legion strength to challenge Horus and his allies. The Salamanders attacked from the left flank, while the Raven Guard struck from the right and Ferrus Manus led his forces dead centre. The battlefield, scarred by ordnance, proved treacherous as the loyalist forces disembarked. Facing sustained bolter fire, many warriors fell before establishing a secure position. The clash that ensued was a cacophony of death, with weapons discharging in unison, missiles streaking through the air, and explosions tearing through the enemy defences. Amidst the chaos, the true onslaught had only just begun. As the Salamanders clashed with the World Eaters in brutal close-quarters combat, a large force of fire drakes engaged in a bloody stalemate with Angron's personal bodyguard, the Devourers. Angron issued a challenge to his brother Primarch, Vulkan, amidst the chaos and carnage, calling out his name in the World Eater's native tongue and then in High Gothic. The atmosphere was charged as Angron brandished his motorised power axe, ready for combat. However, before the two Primarchs could clash, a missile strike caused a massive explosion, engulfing the slope in flames. Despite the devastation, Vulkan emerged unscathed, leading his remaining fire drakes onward, determined to continue the battle. Relief washed over him as reinforcements from the Alpha Legion Iron Warriors, Word Bearers and Night Lords arrived. As the Loyalists took their positions, Angron was nowhere to be seen, and it became apparent that the Lord of the Red Sands had ordered a retreat in the face of the additional legions. Upon withdrawing towards their drop site, the Raven Guards and the Salamanders made way for their newly arrived reinforcements to prove their valor against the traitors. Despite efforts from Vulkan and Corax to convince Ferrus Manus to do the same, the determined Gorgon led the Iron Hands to press the attack against the retreating traitor forces. Unbeknownst to the Loyalists, the drop site had been fortified by 4 secret traitor legions, prepared to form the second wave of the Imperial assault on Horus's forces. As the rebels of Horus retreated in disarray, the 18th and 19th legions fell back in an organised manner, accompanied by tanks and legionaries, displaying resilience despite their losses. On the opposite side of the Urgal Depression, the Iron Warriors, outfitted in steel grey with black and yellow chevrons, stood stern and unresponsive, their armoured bastions and cannons poised for battle. Even as Vulkan approached Perturabo, the Lord of Iron, the Iron Warriors remained motionless, betraying no hint of their sinister intent. Suddenly, over 10,000 guns turned on the Salamanders, trapping them between the treachery of the supposed allies and the might of Horus's forces. After the devastating battle on Isfahan V, the 3 Loyalist legions suffered heavy losses, with only a few battle brothers surviving. The Iron Hands Primarch Ferrus Manus tragically fell to his former friend and brother Fulgrim, the Primarch of the Emperor's Children. Following this defeat, the Salamanders and the others betrayed Space Marine legions focused on rebuilding their forces, unable to fulfill the Emperor's plans for them. Despite the conflicting reports about Vulkan's fate, it was clear that both Vulkan and Corvus Corax survived the ambush, but the true extent of Vulkan's condition remained uncertain. After enduring a devastating nuclear assault by the Iron Warriors, Vulkan found himself encircled by hundreds of traitor legionaries from the Night Lords and the Iron Warriors. Despite fighting valiantly, the Primarch was outnumbered and eventually succumbed to the relentless attacks, falling unconscious after being shot, stabbed and bludgeoned. Exploiting Vulkan's vulnerable state, the deranged Night Haunter seized the opportunity to torment his brother by taking him captive. Vulkan had been revealed to be a perpetual, a being capable of continuous cellular regeneration much like his father, the Emperor of Mankind. Enraged, Kurz took it upon himself to kill Vulkan as many times as was necessary to permanently rid himself of his intolerable presence. The Night Haunter personally beheaded the Salamander Primarch, ripped out his throat with a piece of cutlery, stabbed him through the chest, and virtually tore him limb from limb with his own wicked claws. When these attempts failed to kill Vulkan, Kurz had him eviscerated, shot at close range by hundreds of bolters, put into a ventilation shaft of the starship's engine, and even stripped naked and thrown out an airlock into the airless void of space. The Night Haunter repeatedly tried to kill his brother Primarch Vulkan, only for Vulkan's body to regenerate and return to its former robust state each time. Further infuriated the Night Lord's Primarch. When Kurz discovered Vulkan's extraordinary regenerative abilities, he subjected him to a series of unwinnable trials in an attempt to break his spirit. These trials included being chained and having to prevent a ceiling from crushing innocent occupants, enduring starvation at a banquet table while watching mortal prisoners suffer. After being trapped in battle plate and forced to hunt captured soldiers and other loyal Astartes. Despite the Night Haunter's use of sorcerer's torture and a failed attempt to break Vulkan's resilience, he ultimately resorted to a final solution, a duel to the death to end Vulkan's presence. After being trapped on a Dark Angel's flagship due to a failed boarding action at the end of the Thramas Crusade, the Night Haunter would eventually manage to reach the surface of Macragge with the intention of completing his mission and killing Vulkan. This conflict involved not only his fellow Primarchs Rabute Gilliman and Lionel Johnson, but also a perpetual named John Grammaticus. Despite the Night Haunter's defeat, Vulkan was seemingly killed by Grammaticus under the instructions of the enigmatic Cabal. Using a piece of fulgurite, a large natural hollow glass tube formed beneath the planet's surface during a lightning strike, Grammaticus pierced Vulkan's heart. This fulgurite was a result of the Emperor's immense psychic power unleashed against the forces of Chaos millennia ago. At that time, what became of Vulkan following the battle remained a mystery. His final fate. As Macragge became the new home of Imperium Secundus, the second stellar empire of humanity created by the Ultramarines Primarch Rabute, more and more survivors of the 18th Legion made their way to the Ultramarines' homeworld. Convinced of their Primarch's death, the Salamanders mourned their genetic sire's loss. The Ultramarines had entombed Vulkan in a heavily decorated casket of pure gold, a fitting resting place for one of the Emperor's sons, or so one would think. To the salamanders standing vigil over Vulkan's body, the cold mortuary chamber in which he now rested was a far cry from the burial rituals of the Promethean cult. For all intents and purposes, the salamanders were a broken legion, the death of their Primarch having broken their indomitable spirit. Matters soon changed when the first captain, Artellus Numion, was successfully saved by an Ultramarine strike force. Many of those among the survivors that hoped that their return from the first captain would bring a new sense of purpose to what remained of the Legion, giving them purpose and direction once again. Numion firmly believed his Primarch's survival, having constantly espoused the phrase, "Vulkan lives." This became Numion's battle cry and the cornerstone of his beliefs. Yet when Numion asked to be taken to his Primarch, he only found an empty casket, Vulkan's body having mysteriously vanished from his final resting place, which planted the seed of doubt amongst Numion's fellow Astartes, officers and Primarchs as to Vulkan's true condition. The whereabouts of the Salamander's Primarch remains a topic of much speculation, as he vanished many standard years after the Horus Heresy. According to some accounts, Vulkan led his chapter for a full 3 millennia before embarking on a clandestine mission undisclosed to the Imperium at large. However, little evidence of his actions during that time has survived, adding to the mystery. Compounding the enigma is the existence of the Tome of Fire, a text purportedly left behind by Vulkan. This tome supposedly contains information about 9 artifacts that the Primarch intended for his chapter. Reportedly, a millennium after the events of the Horus Heresy, Vulkan secreted these 9 artifacts across the galaxy for his chapter to discover, as a test of their worthiness to carry over his legacy. 5 of these relics have been found, with 3, the Spear of Vulkan, Caser's Mantle, and the Gauntlet of the Forge, now wielded by the chapter's current Forge Father, Vulkan Hestan. 2 artifacts, the Chalice of Fire and the Eye of Vulkan, are located on the Nocturnian moon of Prometheus in the chapter's fortress monastery. The remaining 4 artifacts, the Engine of Woes, the Obsidian Chariot, the Unbound Flame, and the Song of Entropy, have yet to be unearthed. The Tome of Fire claims that only when the Forge Father of the Salamanders recovers all 9 artifacts, as 5 have already been, will Vulkan deem the Salamanders worthy of facing the ultimate challenge. According to legend, he will then return to lead the Salamanders in the final war against humanity's foes, as foretold in the chapter's holiest tome. And so I have now covered the content for this video, but if there's anything that has been missed, please share them in the comments down below. If you enjoyed this content, please remember to like the subscribe and like waypoints down below. In the grimdark of the far future, there is only war.